And just to explain, in case someone doesn't know, because 50% of our listeners are about a decade younger than us, Natasha. And then
Good.
25% are our age, and
Mhm.
25% are even younger than that 50% chunk. So
Okay.
for the 75% of you who are younger than us, let me just explain a little bit, because this was something I did not know 10 years ago. The definition of menopause is you've gone 12 months without a period. So menopause really is like the finish line. It's a one-day
Date.
event.
Right. Exactly.
And yet, for me, it was the only part about this hormonal change that I'd ever heard about.
Right.
But guess what? Perimenopause, which is the part before that finish line, can last as long as a decade. A
Yes. Isn't
decade,
that
10
great? Like
years.
when I first heard that, like I never in a million years, I couldn't wrap my brain around that initially when I first heard, like 10 years?
Yeah,
10
imagine being
years.
pregnant for 10 years, like hormonal changes for 10 years, people.
Right.
10 years.
Yeah. The thing
And guess
about
who's had a 10-year perimenopause? Me. I have. That's right. And we're going to talk about it on today's Harness the Power of Planning podcast, episode 83. In part 1, Natascha and I tell our individual experiences with perimenopause, starting now. Hi, we are Alegre and Natascha of Beyond Your Wildest Dreams, or BYWD.
Hi.
And
Welcome.
welcome to our Thursday chat. If for some reason you can't stay here for the whole chat, you can always listen to this as the Harness the Power of Planning podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. I believe this will be episode 83. And today we're going to be talking about perimenopause, our experiences, and what we're doing about it. So if you've been listening to the podcast, you know I've been dividing up the podcast into parts so you can listen to smaller parts, which apparently y'all are really liking, because
Little nuggets.
I know the parts are getting like 300% more listens than the full episode.
I think just, yeah, people want little snippets, right? I mean, shorts are really popular. You know what I mean? Like when people go into, yeah, so we're consuming our media in smaller chunks these days.
Yeah, I get it. So if you want a little dose of us, you can go listen to the parts, but we also have the whole thing up there. And, I've been saying for weeks now that I'd like to start our chat/podcast with a
Oh,
quote.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I keep forgetting to do it. So for those of you who are listening to the podcast, I have this little box of quotes, and I love pulling quotes from, and I never know what it's going to say. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to pull from the back. I have no idea what it's going to say, and it's upside down. Patience is also a form of action.
Oh,
Patience is also a form of action. Auguste Rodin. Rodin? Rodin?
sure.
Is that the sculptor? I don't know.
Sculptors might know something about patience. Um,
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I love this quote.
that
Do
is a
you have
great
anything to say?
quote. That feels like the opposite. I feel like, like you gotta be in action, you gotta take action, right? And just the idea of patience more and more. I've recognized that patience, I don't want to say is a virtue because that's not how I relate to it. I'm sure it is, but really is that's true. That quote is true. Now there's a difference. You can go from patience into inaction, right? You can like
Yeah.
be super patient and then just kind of like, so like, but the idea, just like, especially around my kids, like just having some patience and like letting something just work itself out before I jump in. And, when they were younger, there's a lot more of that, but they're older now. It's just kind of like waiting, patient. My kid asked me a
Mhm.
dumb question. I just wait. They figure it out. Like my 11-year-old this morning, we have like a little tissue dispenser hanging from the visor in the car, and I hand him a stack of some we keep napkins in there. I say, "Hey, can you put those paper napkins in the thing?" And he's like, "Uh, how do you do it?" I was like, "It's literally like a flap, And I'm like, "I'm just gonna wait, let you figure it out on your own. I think you can do it." You know. I don't know if that's
Absolutely.
patience so much as, but just
I know.
yeah.
I think that is. I think that totally qualifies. And I have to say I've used patience a lot when I'm in a situation where I don't know what to say. And it's usually not
Mhm.
a conversation. It's more like a negotiation, or
Yes.
maybe it's a separation from
Yes.
a professional position, where you know it's no longer serving you and you want things to end well, but you don't know what to say.
Mhm.
I have a rule, which if you listened to this before, you know that I like to set these rules for myself. But I have a rule that I don't say anything until I feel like I have the right thing to say. And that has always served me well,
Yeah, that sounds
where
like it would.
yeah, where the patience and the finding the right thing to say completely 360-degree or 180-degree, 180 twice, turns the situation around. Because I was actually in this situation where I was working for a really, really toxic employer, and it took me months to figure out the right thing to say, but when I said it, this person was jazzed about what I suggested, like, how about I do this for you?" Was so jazzed and actually, like, gave me gifts when I left. So
Yeah, so you had the patience to just figure out, like, wait till the right thing came. Yeah, I think especially in my younger years, I felt like, oh no, I have to respond. I have to act, right? And it's just like, no, you can take some time. You can wait until the right time is right, or the right words come, or even just wait for there be more information
more
too, right? You
information.
know? Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, patience
Yes.
is definitely something I've cultivated way more of.
I
That
love this deck. It is so awesome. I and it's
Yeah, you
great
gave
because
me one of those, and I love it.
it has, like, I don't know, 200 cards and the quotes are on both sides. I've still never seen the same quote twice. So,
That's
okay,
fun.
patience is also a form of action. Love it. August Rodin or Rodin, or I don't know. If someone else knows how to pronounce that, please tell me because I have no idea
Which is correct.
what what I'm saying here. So, for those of you who might be joining us for the first time, hello. We are BYWD. We are on a mission to help working moms, caregivers, moms, dads, parents prioritize themselves and their goals by harnessing the power of planning. Hence the title of the podcast, Harness the Power of Planning. Because I believe, and this has been my experience too, that with planning, everything is possible, everything is easier, and way more gets done than gets done if I don't plan. And I'm calmer about it as well.
100%. 100%. Yeah. I've had some really busy days lately and I've been time blocking them. And even if they haven't gone exactly like my time blocks, at least I'm not losing track of the things that are important. You know, it's
Mhm.
just really important to the planning helps as opposed to the days where I'm just freewheeling it. Good luck.
Yeah, and we've written 4 books that are all workbooks because Natasha and I have learned in our many decades of educational experience, meaning educating others as well as ourselves, but we've learned that you learn best the brain science says you learn best by doing, and so these are our workbooks. They take about 45 minutes to go through, but you're going to immediately use the information that we give you in these books. So you're gonna walk away having learned something and changed how you do things. And if you want a quick win, this is our quick win book. This was the Amazon bestseller. This is a great gift. 3, 2, 1 done. 3 simple strategies to get your to-do list done. This is good for anybody. And you can find
And
all of our books at this URL, tinyurl.com/BYWD Amazon. So there you go. And, if you've listened to us before, then you know that we are huge proponents of self care. In fact, that's what our second book was all about. It was all about learning how to prioritize yourself by making a morning ritual a habit. And Natasha and I are huge fans of the morning ritual. I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that it keeps me sane.
yeah, there's a marked difference for when I'm in my ritual and when I'm not.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And by the way, we don't believe in perfection. We believe in progress. My morning ritual done perfectly every day? No. But it's done often enough, well enough that I feel like I'm taking care of myself and therefore I can show up as my best self in all areas of my life.
Right.
And
Right.
the reality is self-care is also healthcare because no one can sleep for you. No one can take your supplements for you.
Oh my
No one
god. I wish someone could sleep for me. No, I wish I could sleep better. I just want I want some sleep. Yeah, no one can do it for you. You're absolutely right.
yeah.
Mhm.
And so anyway, so today's topic is really all about self-care because perimenopause is a big change, right? Like you are born and then there's all those years that you kind of don't remember, thank God, because they were probably really painful. Falling down, all those times when you were learning to walk probably hurt.
And you were so
But
close to the ground. You were
that's
so
true. That's true. You're pretty
well,
gelatinous and close
that's
to
a
the
little
ground.
bit
So
different.
maybe it doesn't hurt that much. But then you go through your puberty, right? Which I guess is a big change. I don't remember it really.
Uh, oh yeah,
Yeah.
no, I remember it being a pretty big change for sure.
No, I
Yeah.
remember it being a change, but like I just don't remember the details around it the way I remember the
Um,
details around perimenopause. And maybe that's just because it was so long ago.
Honestly, yes.
Or
I remember my puberty pretty well. Pretty well. Definitely
but then
remember
you
the
have
first
like
period.
yes, I remember that too. But then you
Mhm.
have like 3 to 4 decades of no hormonal changes.
Except when you're pregnant.
Oh, right. Sorry, pregnancy.
And
Pregnancy.
I mean, you do go well, yeah, you have your cycle, but you have those, but you're basically used to, you have a hormonal cycle obviously every 28 days or there, so therefore they're thereabouts, but it's predictable for the most
Yes.
part, right? And it's like some of us get really heavy cramps, some of us get back pain, whatever your symptoms might be. And then also, hey, if you're on some kind of birth control, you may not get, that may not be a part of your world at all, so it's
You
very
learn to
much,
deal
it's
with
much
it.
more it's a predictable, mostly predictable thing, and you are really prepared for it, right? Because
Yeah.
not only did maybe your mom talk to you about it, probably, maybe, I don't know, it was the 80s, maybe your mom didn't talk to you about it, but it was, by then it had, health in school
Right.
covered what was about to happen, right? And there was a lot of education about it, and you found out about what the boys were going through, and they found out about what you were going through, so like everybody was somewhat informed, maybe not to the degree that was maybe necessary, but the conversation was happening and you were informed. It wasn't like maybe back, centuries before, wherever, where like you just started bleeding, you think maybe you're dying, and your mom throws you,
Not
a
even
pile of,
centuries before, that was my grandmother.
yeah, right. So right, exactly. Not even like earlier in the 1900s or whatever. And then,
Yeah.
somebody threw you a bunch of rags and they were like, take care of it. You know what I mean? And you're just kind of like,
Yeah.
I'm dying, So we were prepared, but nobody prepared. There's no, like, we should have a perimenopause. There should be like a like a required perimenopause course that you take, like in your early 40s, because it can start early, right? It doesn't have to.
Yes.
Yeah, in your early 40s, you should just go back to school for that course, and then you get like a little. Did you get to go home with like a little packet of like maxi pads and tampons, like in an unmarked box?
No, definitely
Yes,
not.
they sent us home in a little with a little box, or maybe it got mailed to us. I don't remember, but it was like unmarked, and it had like
Oh,
it was like
wow.
blue and pink stripes on it, and it was like, this is like
Unmarked.
I just mean like it came. I must have come in like it didn't say Tampax on the outside. You know what I mean? It
Gotcha,
wasn't like
gotcha.
it was like discreet, and it came with like a little plastic like wallet that you can put your pads in and your
Oh,
panty
your
liners. It
to-go
must have been
bag.
sent. It must have been sent to me from Tampax or something. You know what I mean? Like I think that was probably where it probably got sent in the mail. But yeah, you got like a little, and then they should do that. We should get a little package in the mail when you hit 40. That's
Right,
like,
like
hey,
AARP, right? But
exactly, with like
you hit 35.
supplements. Yeah, supplements and a brochure, and like telling you like, hey, questions to ask your doctor, things like that.
Yeah.
We're not prepared. We're
Yeah.
not prepared.
Well, I mean, for me with puberty, thank God for the book, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, because, my mom's Chinese ethnicity, and they just don't talk about these things. And so, honestly, that's how I learned about my period and all of that.
Wow,
And so
you learned it from Judy Bloom.
yep, from Judy
Yeah,
Blume.
yeah,
Mhm. And but, puberty is a very narrow window, and I feel like the experience of puberty for most of us is not as varied as the experiences of perimenopause and
yes,
menopause. And
yes.
and just to explain in case someone doesn't know because, oh, I got our Wrapped statistics this week, really fascinating. So Spotify puts together these statistics
Hmm.
about your listeners and everything, and we're being heard in over 36 countries. Our most popular episode by far is our Plan Your Week episode, which gets 303% more listens than anything else. So that's awesome. Plan Your Week. It's something you can listen to every Sunday to just help you. Super easy,
Walk
just
you
these
through
little
it.
prompts.
Yeah.
And one of the things is that the 50% of our listeners are about a decade younger than us, Natascha.
Mm,
And then
good.
25% are our age, and
Hmm.
25% are even younger than that 50% chunk. So for
Okay.
the 75% of you who are younger than us, let me just explain a little bit because this was something I did not know 10 years ago. Okay. Menopause, the definition of menopause is you've gone 12 months without a period. So menopause really is like the finish line.
Right. It's that one day that
That one day.
360, you haven't had a period for 365 days. That's 365th day is menopause for that
Yep.
24 hours. And then the day after that is what, Allegra?
Post
Post-menopause.
menopause.
Yes. Isn't that wild? Like that's like the legit definition, right?
Yeah,
And
it's like the day
anything,
you give birth. There's all this pregnancy, and then there's all the raising the kid. The day you give birth is
right.
kind of like menopause. It's a one-day
Day,
event.
right, exactly.
And yet, for me, it was the only part about this hormonal change that I'd ever heard about.
Right.
But guess what? Perimenopause, which is the part before that finish line, can last as long as a year. I mean, a year, as long as a decade. A
Yes, isn't that
decade, 10
great? Like
years.
when I first heard that, like I never in a million years, I couldn't wrap my brain around that initially when I first heard like 10 years?
Yeah,
10
imagine being
years.
pregnant for 10 years, like hormonal changes for 10 years, people.
Right.
10 years.
Yeah, the thing
And guess
about
who's had a 10-year perimenopause?
you
This
did.
lady right here.
Hmm.
That's right. I am officially entering year 10. 2025 will be year 10 for
Wow.
me of perimenopause.
Yeah, I so you identified perimenopausal symptoms when you were 40.
When I was 40 was the
Yeah.
first year I lost a period. I went from 12 to 11 periods.
Hmm.
Then the next year I went from 11 to 10. The
Oh.
next 10 to 9. It was like this nice little countdown.
Wow, your body is so efficient. That's
It was
crazy.
like, we're just gonna drop one off.
So
So
this
it was very clear to me.
You make a very good point because like the thing about puberty is that there's so many clear signs that you're going through puberty, right? You start getting hair under your armpits,
Mhm.
blah blah blah, right? So way before you maybe start bleeding, usually, before you start you're on your menses, you have there's other signs, right? Like you're getting little breasts, right? All that kind of thing. With menopause and perimenopause, so you had a clear indication where you dropped a period. I
Mhm.
still get 12 periods a year right now, and I am definitely in perimenopause. So, like,
Right.
the other thing is, it looks so different for so many different women. And I feel like it's an invisible hormonal change, right?
Yeah.
Like puberty, everybody can see you're going through puberty, right?
Yes.
And menopause is invisible, right? And people talk about having invisible disabilities and people don't know what's going on with you. This is, I mean, I'm not saying it's a disability, by the way. I'm just saying it's invisible. Like it's not clear to everybody what's going on. It's not clear to you
No.
even sometimes, right?
No.
Suddenly you're losing sleep. Suddenly like hot flashes make it a very, that's a very specific thing that I feel like everybody's heard about for menopause. But I'm not joking when I say there's at least another 2 dozen,
Oh
maybe
my gosh, I
three
have the
dozen other
list.
symptoms,
Yeah,
right?
huge list. Huge
Huge
list.
list of other symptoms that you're just kind of like, why can't I remember that word? This is a word I use all the time. Yeah, that's perimenopause,
Let me just I have this list ready for us. The perimenopause symptom checklist. Okay, so the obvious ones that we have all heard about: night sweating, hot flashes, uh mood swings. Okay, however, also cold flushes, vertigo,
Yes.
dizziness,
Mhm.
irritability, restless leg syndrome, low mood, anxiety, panic attacks, aggression, rage, palpitations,
That's a good one.
exacerbation of existing mood disorders, overwhelm, lack of focus, poor memory, poor concentration, insomnia, poor quality sleep, muscle cramps, incontinence, urgency.
What does that mean?
I'm guessing that's kind of related to the anxiety. I've never heard it used described that way.
Okay.
Aching joints and muscles, sore, painful breasts, and that's only half
Yes. Like
of the
aching
symptoms.
joints and muscles, these things are, it's crazy. It's crazy what shows up. It's crazy. I have a
Tinnitus,
friend.
by the way. I thought tinnitus was very interesting
Oh,
and, bleeding gums in your mouth.
oh yeah. Your gums are so much more sensitive. I can't tell you how many of my friends and your teeth start moving. Your
Yeah, and
teeth,
I
I
think that's related to the dryness because you kind of overall become dry and
mm,
kind of like meth mouth, like meth when you use methamphetamine, it dries out your mouth and that's why the teeth get messed up. I think it must be related to the body dryness. So
there's just so
basically,
much, so
it
much.
affects everything.
Right. And it's crazy. Like I remember during COVID, I was like, is it COVID or is it menopause? You know what I mean? Like all of these different wild symptoms that you would get, like suddenly just fatigue. Like now my period, when I get it, the first day of my period, I am basically useless. Like I
Okay, so
need,
tell me your perimenopause experience. I want I want us to talk about our perimenopause experiences distinctly so people can see how different our experiences are.
yeah, so I didn't know that I was in it till probably around age 46, 47. Like I may have been having symptoms before that, but I didn't recognize them, like suddenly having a hard time staying asleep, like the
Mhm.
insomnia creeping in. Because also as a mom too, I lost a lot of sleep, especially in the beginning,
Yeah.
and then so it was hard to identify really when that was happening. But like I just mentioned, I still have 12 periods a year. Now they're shifting, but what's weird is that I had always been inconsistent with I was never 28 days on the spot. Like that was not unless I was taking birth control. But when I got off birth control, I was maybe a little bit more regular. I got really regular during perimenopause. Right? Now
That's
it's shifting a little bit,
fascinating.
like really right, like really regular. Use those apps, and it's like,
You're
oh,
like,
your period should start today. Boom, my period would start, right? And that was never the case for me. It got really regular, although now it's kind of shifting. Like I have my period right now and it's 6 days late. So I was like, oh, thank God. It's like it's shifting. The other thing that happened during perimenopause is that my period flow got to like crime scene levels. I mean, we're talking like, you know,
I've heard that. Really
SUV,
heavy.
like I'm like Law and Order SUV. Like you wanted to put like police tape around me. I mean, it was really heavy, insanely heavy, like
That should
beyond
be
with
your Halloween costume next year. Police
just
tape all
police
around
tape.
you,
Oh,
and you're like, "I'm menopause period," or
I am a
perimenopause
menopause.
period.
I'm menstruating. So, uh, what's so crazy is that this period that I'm having right now is the lightest I've ever had. So, like, this has actually changed. Last month's was still crazy heavy. This month's is almost barely there. It's wild.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I'm really and it was 6 days late. I'm like, yay, maybe I'm gonna start losing a period a year. Like, please, 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 please. Yeah. So I'm like, I'd love for it to just start going away. Like that's the part where you think when you're younger, you're like, oh, menopause, that sounds great. No more periods. Y'all, it takes a while before that happens, and you're gonna be going through a lot before it really absolutely totally disappears on you. So the insomnia for sure, irritability, my family would say for sure. I've had some slight heart palpitations, some hot flashes, not a ton, but when it happens, whoo, step back. It is just like I mean, you just sweat through your clothes. It's just
Mm.
pouring off of you when it does happen. It's for me, it's not been very often, but I have friends who had such heavy heart palpitations, they've had to go to see a cardiologist because they thought
Oh,
something else
wow.
was wrong. Like having heart palpitations like 2 dozen times a day, like
Oh my
really,
gosh.
really crazy. Yeah. And also that also coinciding with major hot flashes, major night sweats, that kind of thing hasn't been that severe for me. But yeah, my word recall is really difficult, really, really hard, actually. And then joint pain is crazy. Plus,
Mhm.
we didn't get to this on I don't know if it's on the symptoms list, but your muscle mass really disappears. And I've always been just kind of naturally a strong person. It's just my frame is the way it is, and I've been able to lift heavy things, no problem. I don't really think about it too much. And it's gotten to the point now where I'm like, I have to like put some muscle energy into something like lifting I don't know, a heavy suitcase or something. You know what I mean? I used to just be able to, oh, lift it, no problem. Now I have to be
Mhm.
like, all right, I got to think about this and lift it. I'm still able to do it, but there's definitely a marked difference in muscle mass. So, of course, lifting or muscle training or that kind of thing is super important in menopause, perimenopause, more so than cardio, for sure. At least that's what the experts say. Yes, that's basically how that's been going for me. I'm still having my periods. Hopefully, this is a new trend. This new period, they're going to be a lot lighter because I can't tell you, like yeah, I would bleed through things like unbelievable. I'd have a tampon and a pad, and I would bleed through things. It'd be crazy. It was like that bad. Yeah, that was one of the
And
most.
did you ever have your hormones levels tested
Mhm.
with the blood test? When
I
did you
did,
start doing
and
that?
yes, I did. And one of the things. Oh, I'm sorry.
When did you start doing
I had it tested the first time probably, I think, 2.5 years ago. And the the medical professional had said, "Hey, listen, the problem with this is that it just gives you a snapshot of where your hormones
right.
are right
Yes.
now. So
Yes.
there's no real definitive tests that are like, you are now officially in menopause per se, because I could go back later that day or the next day and my hormonal levels would be different. So
Yes.
it's really tricky. So, but she
Yes.
said, based on your test right now today, she's like, you are in menopause. I'm like, yeah, I didn't really need a test to tell me that. I knew that
Yeah.
it was already happening. So yeah, so that's the unfortunate thing, is that there's no really hard definitive test that can
Yeah.
tell you that at the moment.
No, you're
So,
absolutely correct. Hormones change from day to day, from hour to hour even.
mhm,
So, they're not very useful in definitively telling you what your hormone levels are, but what they are good for is just kind of a benchmark. So you
mhm,
compare year over year, like, what's the trend, if you will?
yeah,
Because, for instance, if you had been testing for 10 years, you might have
right,
seen a downward trend before you started having the hot flashes because
yes,
I mean, my last few years, my hormone levels are so low that it's saying I'm postmenopausal because it just happened to be a low period, in
yeah,
my day, and
yeah,
I'm clearly not menopausal yet, but I knew that I was on a severe downward trajectory, and so, just kind of helpful to me to be like, "Okay, I'm gonna start reading some books about this to
yeah,
educate myself."
right,
So, okay, before I tell my experience with perimenopause, I'm just gonna read the other half of the list for everyone because maybe there's something in here that you are like, "I have this thing and I don't understand why it's coming." Okay, fatigue, I think most of us have had that one. Bloating, digestive issues, changed body odor, tinnitus,
mhm,
allergies, itchy skin, sinus issues, weight gain, body composition changes,
yes, big
hair
one.
loss and thinning, more facial hair, electric shock sensations,
Interesting.
tingling, spatial
Yeah,
awareness,
yeah,
burning mouth or tongue, the bleeding and sensitive gums, bad breath, change in fingernails, skin changes, loss of libido, painful sex, vaginal dryas, UTIs, headaches, migraines, and then, of course, changes in periods.
yeah.
So,
So you just listing that, I have had probably 10 of those. Not anything that's severe, but I had the burning tongue, burning mouth one thing once, and I was like, "What is going on?" And it didn't last a whole day, and it wasn't severe. It wasn't enough to like, make a difference in my functioning per se, but it was noticeable, like really noticeable. Also, that changes in body odor, wild. It was
mm,
wild. The deodorant I had been using forever and ever, all of a sudden did not was not working. And then all of a sudden I switched to a different one. I switched to then what was happening through my cycle, like a deodorant would work for part of my cycle and then stop working, and I have to use a different one for different parts of my
oh,
cycle.
wow,
And
interesting.
wild, like, and then also I'd be fine, and then all of a sudden, boom, there'd be like a plume of body odor that happened like instantly. It wasn't like gradually over the day, right? It'd be like all
Yeah,
of a sudden my pits stank, like out of nowhere. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like that kind of thing. And so I have finally found a deodorant that really works. I highly recommend it. It's, aluminum free, and it's called super deodorant, and it is a little paste that you put on, and it is amazing. It works
cool.
great. Just throwing that out there. We're not sponsored
Yeah,
by super deodorant.
but we
But
should be.
yeah, I mean, it honestly, and I went through a ton of different deodorants to try to find something that worked, because I put clothes on, and then like within like a couple, I mean, I like just showered and I put deodorant on, and like, and I didn't go run a mile or anything, or I'm just living my life. And then all of a sudden I stink. out of nowhere. Yeah, so that took me a while to find the right deodorant. Yeah,
And
my
we'll
husband
put
be
a
like,
link to that in the show notes, so if you're
yeah.
listening later and wanna look that up. So, my perimenopause experience, I feel like pretty much couldn't be different. I first knew that I was entering perimenopause because of my lost period, and I didn't think anything of it year 1. It was when year 2 happened, and now I'm 2 periods down, that I was like, something's happening here."
Mhm.
And so I was just losing a period a year, and I did start having my hormone levels checked then, just because with my annual checkup, just to get
Yeah.
a baseline, because clearly there's this change. And it wasn't until about year 5 that I started having any other symptoms. And for me, the other symptoms were waking up in the middle of the night, wide awake, so usually around 2 AM, and
Mm.
not being able to go back to sleep. That was my biggest symptom. Occasionally, I would feel a little warm, and this is coming from someone who was always needing an extra coat, always feeling
Yeah.
cold, to my husband saying, "You are much warmer than you used to be." I
Oh,
never
wow, he
had
noticed, huh?
Yeah, he noticed
Mm.
too. I never had, like, the sweat. The sweat was never something that I had. So, it was definitely warmth, but it would always go away, and so I would say those were my big 2 that I struggled with about 5 or 4 years ago. And I read this book called What Your it's a very old book, and it had been recommended to me about 10 years before I ever read it. It had been sitting on my shelf, and it's called What Your Doctor Will Not Tell You About Perimenopause. And I got one nugget out of that book, which was this one herbal supplement called Vitex, and that completely took care of those symptoms for me. I had to experiment with the right dose, but, Vitex is also called chasteberry, so you see it in lots of the women formulations, and it's been used for women's health for, generations, and that completely took care of it, because literally for 3 months, I was not sleeping well, and a friend of mine said, "Take some melatonin, take a gummy, do
Yeah.
something, you need sleep," because I was, 3 months of not sleeping well, you're, like,
Oh, yeah.
angry, your brain's just not working properly, but this really took care of it. Maybe after about a month of taking it, I felt like I was totally sleeping through the night. And then I started having it I don't remember if I was having any other symptoms, but for some reason, the Vitex was
Mhm.
not keeping me asleep anymore at a certain point, and my acupuncturist, who I went to when was entering perimenopause, she recommended this Chinese medicine formula, and that seemed to help for a long time. And then about 2 more years later, again, it was like something shifted again, and I need a little bit more, and so I
Right.
found this AM/PM formula that didn't have
Oh,
any of the same active ingredients as the 2 things I'd been taking, and so I added that in, and so basically, I have been essentially symptom free for the last 5 or 4 years from the 2 symptoms that I was really suffering from. And for y I did not understand whether or not it would be useful for me to have hormone therapy, given that my symptoms were managed. And then Natasha and I saw this great documentary. I know it's streaming on PBS. Everyone should watch it. It's called The New Menopause. Watch it with your men folk as well so that they understand what you're going for. Also, one of the interesting things for me about going through perimenopause is I said to my husband, "Hey, have you read any books about how your hormones might be changing?" Because as little as perimenopause is talked about, I feel like men's hormone changes might be discussed even less.
oh my goodness. Yeah, I don't think there's even an awareness that that even occurs at all.
Yeah, because they don't have the same visual as we have with our
Mhm.
periods, right? But, I can tell from his own body composition, something's changing. I can tell from his sensitivity to caffeine and alcohol, things are changing.
Oh, for
So,
sure.
you
Yeah.
know so what the new menopause really convinced me of is the fact that, 1, our female hormones do not just affect our reproductive areas. I remember they showed some imaging of men and women's brains in the documentary, and they showed the parts of the women's brain and the parts of the men's brain that use estrogen, and then they showed the parts of the women's brain and the parts of the men's brain that use testosterone. And I was like, oh my gosh, like it's not just my genitalia using these
The hormone.
hormones.
Yeah.
It's your entire body.
Yes.
Which is why the symptoms, all those symptoms I listed are all over your body.
So varied. Yeah.
And so I believe it is Dr. Haver. Is it Dr. Haver or Dr. Claire?
Yeah.
I forget.
Dr. Claire Haver, Marie Claire Haver, I thought her name was. But she's the one who wrote The New Menopause. That's a book. The documentary is
The M Factor is the book.
The M Factor, yes. The M Factor is the documentary. The New Menopause, though,
is the book.
All y'all beg, borrow, steal to get this book. I mean, you have to, like, whatever, you get it out of the library, do what you have to do to listen or read this book, because it is eye-opening, and it's the latest information available. She's packed it with the latest information available about research and so forth, and then solutions, right? Ways in which to help yourself combat these symptoms. And then also really understanding what Alegre's talking about right now is that the decrease in estrogen is affecting your bones. Like this is like you don't want to, it's affecting the potentiality later. It's not very well researched yet for Alzheimer's. I mean, like there's a lot of things that are not, it's not just hot flashes, right? Yes. There's a lot of things that are going on in your body that has to do with, as Alegre said, your full body systems that is invisible to us. And so even Alegre, who has been symptom-free, has gone ahead and recognized the importance of dealing with the decrease in hormones and decrease, especially in estrogen.
Yeah. So let me just repeat one thing really quick. So the M Factor is the free documentary. I know you can stream it on PBS. And then Dr. Haver is in the M Factor. And she also wrote a book called The New Menopause.
Correct.
And I would also recommend a book called The XX Brain by Lisa Mosconi. And we'll put this all in the show notes, okay? But so let's just say that this is the end of part 1 of today's podcast. Natascha and I talking about our perimenopause experiences. Thank you so much for joining us today. As always, we're here every Thursday at 9:30, but you can always catch the replay at the Harness the Power of Planning podcast, wherever you listen, or you can always watch it on YouTube. It's also up there on our website to rewatch again whenever you want. Dream wild, wild dreamers. Thanks for joining us for the Harness the Power of Planning podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you listen.